Actually, I'm here to write history. It's the first time ever in Egypt to have a real election for a presidential period. So I hope it will work for the best.
That's just one of 50 million eligible voters in Egypt heading to the polls for the first presidential election since they ousted Hosni Mubarak last year. The whole world watched that. Now, this landmark vote pits Islamists against secularists, revolutionaries against former Mubarak loyalists. It's a fascinating election. 13 candidates. 5 are considered potential frontrunners. Let me just give you a rundown on people to watch here. Mohamed Morsi is the conservative-minded candidate. He's for the once banned, now very popular Muslim Brotherhood. Then you've got Ahmed Shafiq. He was the prime minister in the last days of the Mubarak regime, and he's been called the counter-revolution candidate. Then you've got Amr Moussa, who also has tied to the Mubarak administration, acting as Mubarak's Minister of Foreign Affairs for 10 years. But remember, he had a falling out with Mubarak back in 2001. Then you've got Abdel Monheim Abdul Fattah, a moderate Islamist who quit the Muslim Brotherhood. He has popular appeal across a number of bases. And finally, you've got Hamid Sabahi. He's an old-school candidate hoping to win big with the traditionalists. Now, really, though, we're measuring, we look at this election, what are the implications if, for example, the Muslim Brotherhood wins compared to more liberal candidates? How will the election outcome affect Israel's relationship, Egypt's relationship with Israel or the U.S. and the West and Egypt itself? Let's get some perspective on this all-important election. In Toronto, Mohamed El Rashidy is the director of the Canadian Arab Federation. He's with me. Beside him is Janice Stein, the director of the Munk School of Global Affairs. Welcome to both of you. Mohamed, we just sort of had a list of the candidates. What's your take? The vote is ongoing. What are you keeping your eye on?
Well, first of all, I spoke to a number of people on the ground, and people are in a festive mood. Things are going very smoothly. It's well organized. The army is out in full force, so is the police. So things are going very well, and people are very ecstatic to have this opportunity. In terms of the candidates, you did a very good job of summarizing the 5 main competitors. I think you've got the 2 extremes of people who belong to Mubarak on the one hand, and it is Shafiq is the main candidate that would sort of keep the status quo as much as possible. And then you keep steering away from that with Moussa being next. And then you have Abdel Fattah, who is sort of a combination of the Islamists as well as the revolutionaries and liberals. And then you go to the Muslim Brotherhood. And over there you have the Morsi candidate, who is actually a backup candidate. I personally, Evan, I think I respect the process, and I think Egypt is the winner regardless. But I would prefer somebody other than Mr. Shafiq on the one hand and Mr. Morsi on the other. And Shafiq is for obvious reasons, because he was the prime minister when the Mubarak resigned. So obviously you can't get closer than that to the former regime, and Egypt needs to clean house and start a new page. The Morsi candidate is the Brotherhood. I have an issue with him. It's not so much about the politics. I think people in a democratic process will always have to answer to their population. So in 4 years, as long as the institutions are strong, he will have to go if he's not good. But my issue is that Parliament now is dominated by the Brotherhood and the more conservative Salafis. And I don't think that this revolution was about removing the Mubarak's party, the NDP, which is a one-party system, to replace it with another, which would be the Brotherhood, in case Morsi wins.
Jess, what's your view? What are you expecting to see here?
Well, first of all, Evan, it's important to remember, out of these 5 will come 2. And we will have a runoff election in another 2 weeks. So this is only the first round, and we can play with all the combinations, just as Mohamed was doing just now. The one he does not want to see is Morsi, the Brotherhood, against Shafiq, the former prime minister. The one the Liberals do want to see, the combination the Liberals do want to see, is Amr Moussa against Fattah. The Liberal Brotherhood, former member of the Brotherhood, who, by the way, is endorsed by Al-Noor, the Salafist party. So all the lines are crossing. But there is a bigger picture here, Evan. This is not only the first presidential election since Mubarak was ousted. This is the first ever free presidential election in Egypt's history. This is a big day.
So let's look at it through different political lenses. Mohamed, I'll start with you. if we could do it like this, I mean, if the West, the U.S., Canada, if the West is watching, what do they want to see, if they want to see anything? In other words, what would they see from post-Arab Spring? And then what would Israel want to see? These are these critical cleavages as we watch these elections. Mohamed and then Janice.
I mean, it all depends, right? I think it's fair to say that anybody who believes in democracy would want whatever a fair election will bring about. If you truly believe in democracy, then you truly want the will of the people to be reflected by the ballot box. You no longer want to oppress the people in order to have someone who runs them temporarily in the direction that foreigners want them to go. So I think we have to stick with, let's make it a fair election, and whatever comes out, we deal with it. I don't think that there is anything to fear once you believe in the democratic process and the democratic process is taking its course. That's really the most important thing. In terms of Egypt's relations with its neighbors, every single candidate, there were 13, by the way, cut down from the initial 1,200 applicants. The 13, not a single one has supported war or hinted at any kind of aggression towards anyone. Everyone has been very clear that the focus will be on the domestic problems, and no doubt the new president will have to focus on that. And while relations will change inevitably with the neighbors, I don't foresee this, and everyone is adamant about it, that there's not going to be any aggression towards anyone. War is the last thing on anyone's mind in Egypt today, that's for sure.
Janice, what's your take on maybe where Israel or the West wants to see this?
I'm sure that there are candidates in both cases that they like more and that they like less. But I think this is a really crucial point, Evan, the democratic process really has to be respected, and I have no doubt that it will be by Obama in the United States and by anybody else. But the second big point is the really crucial issues in these elections are domestic. Israel shows up as a campaign theme, certainly, in virtually all 5 candidates, but not getting a lot of airtime or a lot of oxygen. This election is about jobs, about creating employment opportunities for the does this sound familiar, by the way, for the 25 to 30% of youth who do not have jobs in Egypt, about reforming the economy, about ending the kleptocracy. This next president is going to be consumed by domestic issues. They're going to have to negotiate with the World Bank.
I mean, some want to know, let's say the Muslim Brotherhood wins. I mean, does Egypt move towards more closer to Sharia law? Does it change the Mubarak kind of Egypt? People concerns about, for example, what would happen to the Coptics or other realignment in the Middle East?
It's not going to lead to any realignment in the Middle East. And the Brotherhood candidate is actually a fairly conservative guy who supports liberal economic policies. He comes actually from the private sector, and he actually supports an opening of the Egyptian economy. So there is not a huge variation here across the 5. I do not expect anything radical to come out of this election. What will come out is this next president survives on his capacity to actually create jobs in the Egyptian economy. Now that tells you something. He has to deal with the international institutions, he has to deal with the United States, and he does not want to distract the country in any, as Mohamed just said, in any kind of adventure with Israel. So basically, this is a regime. Anybody who wins is going to look in, not out.
Mohamed, last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, the Brotherhood, while I wouldn't say Morsi is the best candidate for Egypt at the moment, but the Brotherhood is very capitalist in a business sense. They really are, which is sort of counter to how people view them. But I just want to say that even the most extreme candidates, the Egyptians have gotten a real crash course in politics, especially in relation to religion in politics. And they've had a lot of religious figures come forward that belong to religious parties. And they've sort of stripped the veil off of this concept that if you're religious, you're right away more trustworthy. As more candidates are exposed and put in the spotlight, they're seeing that just because you have a longer beard and so on doesn't make you more religious. And this is a very important lesson for Egypt. It's not about religion. And we're seeing that across the board. So I think as time goes on, there will be more equilibrium rather than just looking at and saying we want the anti-secular or anti-religious. Right. There's going to be more equilibrium. And that'll also apply in terms of more friendly relations in the region.
All right. Well, we'll be watching this closely. Mohamed El Rashidy, of course, and Janice Stein. Fascinating election. All eyes on Egypt right now. I appreciate your perspective. We just got to get the framework down so people understand, the range of candidates. As you say, very fresh process going on.
Evan, we should have some early results by tomorrow night.
Yeah, and we'll be following that very closely.